Hi again, Mark here from TalkingBass. This week we're looking at an element of musical study that can totally change how you look at both playing and writing bass lines and music in general. It'll change how you learn bass lines, it'll allow you to approach fills and solos in a much more melodic way, and this is one of the most important melodic bass lessons that you'll probably ever have. So you know how everyone tells you to learn chord tones instead of scales? Well, it is true, chord tones are the key to learning pretty much everything about music. But there's obviously more to music than just chord tones. What about scales? What about chromatic notes? Well, the key to using any note, and that's like any note over any chord, is the use of melodic devices. Melodic devices are a way of using scales and chromatic notes around the notes of a chord. We can use passing notes, neighbour notes, approach notes, enclosures, and many other devices for embellishing chord tones and creating melodies or bass lines. This is the kind of, music theory that can have a real impact on your music learning in general. So this lesson is taken from Volume 2 of the Ultimate Music Theory for Bass course over at the TalkingBass website. The complete course is now available after the initial release of Volume 1 last month. It takes you from the absolute basics of music theory all the way through to advanced jazz harmony. So it's pretty much kindergarten to university level in one huge course. I've pretty much condensed everything that I learned over 6 years in academic music training and presented it all in simple steps with full application to the bass guitar. So this lesson is taken from the 5th module of the course. It's discounted for the first 2 weeks of release, so grab a bargain while you can, and without further ado, here's some melodic devices. In previous lessons, we've looked at chord tones, the notes of a chord. We worked through the arpeggios for every chord that you're ever likely to face. We also looked at how chord tones work over a chord progression, how they are the consonant notes. So as a quick refresher, if we play over the chord progression of C, F, C, G, one bar each, all major chords, we can make use of the chord tones in playing a simple melody. So let's just try 2 different combinations of chord tones to hear how consonant they are and how they work over the chords. So first of all, we'll just try 3rd and then root note, and then we'll try 3rd and 5th. So for instance, over a chord of C major, we're going to have E to C, and then with the 3rd to 5th, it's going to be E to G. Okay, so let's have a listen to how they sound consonant. So you can hear there that the chord tones work. The consonant, they're the notes in the chord, so they blend well. But we also looked at how the non-chord tones, still within a key, might not work so well if we isolate them. So with that progression again, C major to F major, C major to G major, here are some notes in the key of C major that might sound a little odd. That's the 4th over the C. That's the 4th over the F. That's the 6th over the G. So these are non-chord tones. These chords are not in those chords, but they are within the key of C major. So again, here's that 4th over the C, the F. Again. Now that's 6th over the G. Okay. So those notes are all in the key of C major. The progression is in the key of C major. So why don't they work? Well, it's because they're not the chord tones. They're not consonant to those chords there. We're playing non-chord tones. But I'm here to tell you that yes, you can absolutely use non-chord tones over those chords, and even chromatic non-chord tones outside of the key, and you can make them sound okay, good, great, and amazing. You can use any note of the chromatic scale and make it work over any chord. It's all down to how you use them. And remember, tension and release, consonance and dissonance are all your musical friends. So here's a chord of C major. So that's our chord. We've got the chord tones there. Now if I play an F over that chord, it sounds very dissonant. But watch this. If I play E, F, G, that F sounds fine. I can play those notes quick, or I can play them slow. it still works because F has a function. It's a passing note. We're passing between the F and the G. If I played on its own, it's dissonant, but then I resolve it and it's fine. So it's a little harder with that dissonance on beat 1 because it's, accented. But, as long as I resolve it, it doesn't matter. It takes on that function, so. That F's in there. There it is on its own. It's fine when you give it function. So, like I said, rhythm also plays a part in this. Place a dissonance on a very strong beat, like beat 1, and it's going to emphasize that dissonance. So again, with the track, if we were to place that F and then resolve it, if we place the F on the beat 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now the F on beat 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice how it's more accented. If we tried it on beat 2, 1, then maybe beat 3, 1, 2. Okay, so rhythm and the duration of that dissonant note all plays a part in basically how dissonant it's going to sound. But as long as you resolve it, it doesn't matter. So again. Once you've resolved it, that function is there and it seems purposeful. So if we use a non-chord tone to pass between two chord tones, so over C major, E, F, G, that F there, that's called a passing note. Okay, so we're passing between two chord tones. And passing notes are what we call melodic devices, and there are quite a few of them. We have passing notes, neighbour notes, which we can also call auxiliary notes, approach notes, enclosures, there's a bunch of them. And there are a whole bunch of ways to analyse non-chord tones using those melodic devices. And in classical music, you'll see terms like auxiliary notes, acciaccaturas, appoggiaturas. There are turns and mordants, lots of different ways to see them. But we'll stick to the basics that will work for us bass players and how we approach playing. So first up, let's look a little closer at passing notes. Now, like I said, they pass between two chord tones. So let's take that C major chord again. So if we play the arpeggio, we've got C, E, and G, and let's play some passing notes between those chord tones. Now, the passing notes that we're going to use are going to be taken from a scale. It's scalar movement. Usually, this is going to be the scale used for the key, but in more advanced compositions or improvisation, you might use a variety of exotic chord scales. We'll get to those later. For now, we're in the key of C major, so we'll use the C major scale for our passing notes. So what passing notes would we play over that C major chord? Well, if we take the root note, and then the third, we can pass between them with the D. So that's C, D, E. So the D is a passing note between the C and the E. Then we could try E, F, G. So the F is the passing note between the third and the fifth. Then we could play G, A, B, C. So remember the G, because this isn't a seventh chord, that's the top note of our arpeggio. So then the next one up is going to be C. So we've got A, B leading up to the C. So G, A, B, C. So the A and the B are both passing notes there. Okay, so C, D, E, E, F, G, G, A, B, C. And then if we were to combine some of them, we could combine the passing notes between the root and the third, and then the third and the fifth. And then we could start at the E and work up to the C. Now, obviously, when you look at the notes like this, you might be just thinking, this is just scalar movement. We're just playing bits of the scale, which you are. But the point here is that when you see these as melodic devices, you're always paying attention to the chord tones. Okay, that's the framework. They're the consonant notes. When you're playing over a chord, like we've seen, landing on one of those non-chord tones can actually be pretty disastrous. So when you see the chord tones and then see the scalar movements as working around that framework, it's going to be a lot safer for one thing, but you're also just going to find ways of making use of scales rather than just thinking, there's a scale, or just picking up random scale fragments. You're actually then seeing how you can use scales to connect the chord tones. how we're working around that framework. Now, obviously, we can also descend through passing notes as well. So if we were to start on the third and then drop down to the C, so E, D, C, and then G, F, E, then C, B, A, G. Okay, so. And ascending. And what happens if we start on the C and then use all of the passing notes moving up through the arpeggio up to the octave? Well, we find a C major scale. So all of them together. So basically that C major scale, when we're playing over a C major chord, is simply a set of passing notes between each of the chord tones. Now, what if we're in the key of C major, but we're playing over an F major chord, chord 4? Well, we use the chord tones of F major, so that's going to be F, A, and C. But for the passing notes, we still use the C major scale because we're in the key of C major. So if it's a G major chord in the key of C, we use chord tones of the G major chord and the scale notes of C major. If it's a D minor chord in the key of C, we use the chord tones of D minor and the scale notes from C major. So the key, we're in the key of C major. That's our palette of notes. So as an example of making use of passing notes over that chord 4, if we're in the key of C major and we've got the chord of F major, and we want a passing note between the third and the fifth, what note are we going to use? Well, the third is going to be A, the fifth is going to be C, so the passing note in between them is going to be B. So, relative to that F, we're actually using an augmented fourth there. We're not using the perfect fourth like we did over the C major. We're using that augmented fourth because it's taken from the notes of the C major scale. A, B, C. Okay? So, let's try some passing notes played through a chord progression in C major. So, we'll play that same C, F, C, G progression, one bar each, and play various chord tones and passing note combinations. So, we'll start with first, second, third on each chord, then we'll move to the third, fourth, and fifth, then the fifth, sixth, seventh to the octave. So that's the first to the third. Try descending. Now third to the fifth. Descending. Now fifth up to the octave. Descending. Now let's try some seventh chords. Now the difference with seventh chords is we have a seventh as a chord tone, meaning we can create a single passing note between the fifth and the seventh. So let's try that same set of passing notes over a 1, 2, 5 progression in C. So this is going to be C major 7 for 2 bars, D minor 7 for a bar, and then G7 for a bar. Root to the third. Down. Third to the fifth. Down. Fifth to the seventh. And down. Okay. Now it's worth mentioning at this point that if we isolate one of those non-chord tones and play it pretty much on a strong beat, we're really implying that the note we have is a chord tone. Yes, you could describe them as accented non-chord tones, but let's see how this works over that 1, 2, 5 progression. So what we're going to do this time is play a line of 7, 1, 2, okay? And that's going to be over each chord. So what we're doing there is accenting, because we're landing on it, the second or the ninth, okay? So we're really implying that that ninth there is an actual chord tone. That's the ninth. Again. That ninth is really the main flavour there. Again. So in those chords, we're really highlighting that ninth. That's not a melodic device like a passing note. That's being played as a ninth, okay? So remember, rhythm and note placement play a part in how we perceive all of the notes. For instance, that is not a ninth or second used in passing. You know, the very, concept of that word, passing. We're not passing, we're landing right there on it. Okay, now let's look at another type of melodic device. Let's look at the neighbour note. Now you might also see these described as auxiliary notes. All we do here is play a chord tone, then we play the neighbour non-chord tone and return. So over a C major chord, we could play C, D, C, or E, F, E, or G, A, G. Those are upper neighbour notes. Then we could try lower, so we could play C, B, C, E, D, D, E, and G, F, G, and they would be lower neighbour notes. Yes, the seventh might be in the chord at times, making that lower neighbour notes from the first chord tone, but don't worry about that. It's still a melodic device. So now let's try out some of those neighbour notes over the 1, 2, 5 progression. So C major 7 for 2 bars, D minor 7 for a bar, G7 for a bar. So for each one of them, we're going to play an upper and lower neighbour note on each chord tone. Upper neighbour note on the root note, on the D. Now lower. Now on the third. Now lower. Now on the fifth. Now lower. Now from the seventh. Now lower. Okay. Next, let's look at approach notes. Now, approach notes move straight into a chord tone from out of nowhere. There's no chord tone setup. So for a major chord, like a C major, we could play D straight into C, or B into C. So there's no chord tone before that. And we can play these as unaccented or accented. Accented approach notes are going to be very dissonant because of the approach note occurring on a strong beat. So, non-chord tone on strong beat equals dissonance. So you have to be very careful how you approach them, pardon the pun. So now let's try some approach notes over that chord progression. So for the C major 7, we're going to start with D into C, and I'll play the approach note on a weaker beat just so that it's not too dissonant. Upper approach into the root notes. From below. Now into the third from above. From below. For our final melodic device, let's look at enclosures. Now, these are a combination of both upper and lower approach notes. We play the note above and then the note below, or vice versa, before landing on our target chord tone. So let's take C as an example on a C major chord, the root note, okay? So we can play above and then below and then play the C. So that's D, B, C. So we're enclosing the C there. So we play an approach note on either side. Then we could try with the lower note first. So B, D, C. So we're basically just combining upper and lower approach notes before landing on the chord tone. So, oh. So let's try playing some of these enclosures with the backing track. And remember, if you get confused with any of these non-chord tones, the approaches that we're using, which note you're supposed to use, remember we're sticking to the notes of the C major scale, the main key. Because when you start looking at those individually around the chord tones, you might start to be working from a more tonic-centric perspective when you're looking at it. So you're seeing this kind of pattern from the root note up. We'll be looking at chord scales shortly, so that will probably help a lot with that. But for now, we're just thinking notes of the key. From below. So now, how might we incorporate some of these melodic devices into our bass lines? Well, melodic devices are a great way to embellish chord tones and lead into subsequent chords. So let's take a simple chord progression of C major 7, F major 7, C major 7 and G7, 1, 4, 1, 5, all 7th chords there, and we'll use melodic devices to create some lines. So first of all, let's just acclimatize to the actual chord progression. So we'll just play through the arpeggios of each chord. So we've got C major 7, F major 7, C major 7, and G7. So now let's try a bass line making use of some passing notes. So here you can see the line over the C major 7. We've got the root note, and then we're going to raise up through the C major scale. So we've got leading us up into the F. So 1, 2. And then we come down again after we've hit the F. So then again hit the C, and then we use passing notes leading down through the scale, landing on the G, and then we have a rise up through that C major scale on that G7. Then we've got the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and then the root note leading us back into the C. So if you've worked through those exercises with the passing tones, you will recognize some of these moves. You'll recognize those passing notes between the 3rd and the 5th, and between the root and the 3rd. So let's hear that with the backing track. So now let's try applying some neighbour notes. So the line here is all written there in the lesson material. I'm not going to bother working through the whole thing. You can see the neighbour notes in there. It's just a line that you can learn and play through this progression. So each time we're going to use a neighbour note on the root note, and then above the 3rd, and then above the 5th. Now let's try some approach notes. So all we're going to do here is approach the root note of the next chord. This is where approach notes really come in useful for bass players. So first time round we're going to approach from above, and then second time round we'll approach from below. And then we can try the same exercise with enclosures. So again, we're going to approach the root note of each chord. First time round, we'll start on the upper approach note, and second time round, the lower. Okay, so that's a set of melodic devices that you can start to use in your bass playing, melody writing, and improvisation. So at all times here, we're working around the chord tones. Okay, so all of these melodic devices, they allow us to make use of scales and scalar movement while always taking notice of the actual harmony. It's also important to point out here that all of these melodic devices are the same in a minor key. We just use that minor scale as our main palette of notes for the non-chord tones. So in the next lesson, we'll start to incorporate chromatic notes.